to the conclusion of the slightly compromised 10 hours at the ring, brought to you by Schwitzer Racing League. So, you may remember, viewers, of the last stream that just before 6 hours had taken over into this chaotic race in which the lead driver was, or the lead team was, the Porsche of Stefan Dahmer. He's now down in 6th. There'll be a bit more as to how that's happened a little bit later on. The server crashed. Now, whilst the admins tried to work out what exactly they could do to rectify that and have the race still finish at what would be 1:30 Central European time and 12:30 in the United Kingdom, what they ended up doing was putting a 3.5 hour race, a 3.5 hour sprint to the finish, mandating 4 pit stops, which is why you see that some drivers still have 3 to go in the yellow bracket that you can see there, and some still have 2. We'll go through the order just shortly, but it does appear, obviously, that you can see that the rain has intensified since the restarting of the race. Obviously, the lobby had to be restarted completely, and it will be only the result from this race that will be taken forward. So, unfortunately, if you were one of those that was leading, then unfortunately that lead was wiped out, and that's why you see that Stefan Dahmer, for example, who was the lead driver or part of the lead team for Schwitzer Motorsports' second entry, is down in 6th, and why you can see that Jürg Maserat, for example, in the NRW Performance Ferrari, is 10th, having been a solid 4th at the time. So we'll take you through the order as we see now. That's MSA Racing 414 in GT3. That is İlkay Erkli-Çoglu, who's currently leading in the BMW 414 entry. He is followed by Hannes Rust, who has really risen with the Lamaxo Esports second entry. They've really risen from the ashes because they made a terrible start nearly just over 8 hours ago, and had an awful run in the early knockings of this race. They rescued themselves up to 6th place in the end by the time that everything came crashing down. And now look at them, they're 17.8 seconds off of the lead, but they're second place. You've got Hansen there in the revived 100 Porsche for Bremsbach and Spreiser team, who, while they were running second for a lot up to the first half, really, the halfway point of the race, they, due to a disastrous pit stop about midway through the race, had dropped to 7th. The first entry for Schwitzer Motorsports was the pole car. Now it's Hochhausen who's taken over with Pascal Futter, having piloted that car back up into second place at the time we all finished. And we've got Stefan Dahmer now, who's coming into the pits from 5th place, which is not where that Porsche was. That Porsche was leading and was proving to be a real thorn in the side for those at the top end. So some strife has happened to that Porsche in order to have that drop there. We'll try and find out a little bit more as we go through. Tony Garona for the second MSA Racing Ford. They've had a bit of a rescue because they hit problems, connectivity issues limited their potential in the original 10-hour race, but with the shortened 3.5-hour race, it's rescued them. They're now running in 6th, what will be 5th now, with Dahmer having taken to the pit lane. Fabio Travaglioni in the Virtual Pro Racing team. Now, this team disconnected and lost all internet, it would appear, for some considerable time, so did not return until the race was restarted. This was, again, with about 5.5 hours to go. They were running 5th at the time, a strong 5th, it must be said. But Travaglioni and co for Virtual Pro Racing, Cornera, the 51 Ferrari, have rescued themselves already. They've got 2 stops to make, whereas drivers in front have 3. So don't count this team out from the likely win earlier on. They're now in 6th place, with them having passed Stefan Dahmer in the Porsche. The Porsche now has re-entered the track behind, I do believe, Goat. Yes, you can see their Goat in the Apex GT. Now, this McLaren has gone a slightly different way. As you can see, they have only 1 pit stop left, whilst drivers around them have 2. Could this be an ingenious move? Goat now running in 7th place for the Apex GT entry. The striking McLaren there. Could this be a bit of a genius move? Because you lose at least a minute, potentially, if you're coming in for tyres and fuel. And what they've done by stopping, whether they've played a bit of a joker in terms of fuel, I would suggest that that is possibly the case for at least one of their stops, but it's put them in a position where they've got one stop to make in 2 hours. Very doable in the McLaren, with the fuel consumption not expected to be an issue, especially in the rain, and the car being pretty good at looking after its tyres. But he has got a fired-up Bloom now. Daniel Bloom, who had been so impressive in leading the way for the Porsche outfit, for Schwitzer Motorsport's second entry. He's now a fired-up 7th, looking to make a move on Go. Now, Go won't fight this too hard, but he won't make it easy either. Jürg Maserat now up into 9th place for a harm to Ferrari. It doesn't look like there's damage on that car. So whilst it is purple, I thought I could see a little lot there. Can't see an awful lot there from that angle. The spray much greater than it was before, as Erkel Joglu there, the leader, is stuck behind them, and he's just gone off the track now, so that could impact them. To be fair, the first 5 cars are also in sync with each other in terms of the pit stops. As you can see, they've got 3 pit stops to make, whereas Travaglioli is the first of the already having stopped twice crew. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? In P6 to have a real crack at it. Now we can see that there's a few drivers who've dropped out. There's a few teams who've dropped out. I think for timing issues, I think I can see there. So we are going to go now into what is P11. There was 13 or 14 entries in GT3 earlier on. We'll bring you details as to who has dropped out a little bit later on, but it's very much the same old story. As Garcia for the Velocity Racing team was dominant with his teammate Fernandez in the initial staging of this race, and it's business as usual as they've simply driven away again, haven't they, in the Mercedes. Now, there are 2 Mercedes drivers who have pitted, or who were running alongside Garcia. That was Richard in the Gridline Motorsport 110 car. That's dropped to the rear of the GT4 field, and it was the Schwitzer Motorsport's 3rd entry, the first of the GT4s, which is now currently being piloted by Stefan Schermann. Stefan Schermann, who is in 4th position in GT4 behind Flesta for Gridline Motorsport, and a bit of a revival there. And the Camaro, the consistent Camaro throughout both stagings of this race, nearing currently in 3rd position, which is about where that car's been throughout the afternoon and into the evening. Kropidlovsky in the Effect Motorsport Aston Martin, that's also been piloted by Nussi and Stein, is in 5th position in class, which is slightly above where that car had been prior to the restaging of this race. And they are now ahead of the Porsche Cayman, which was coming into it after a really difficult start for that team. The car number 1, Scuderia 5 Racing, driven by Pietro Astorino in the Porsche Cayman, going along nicely in 6th position, with Breuer, who has piloted that NRW performance seemingly every time we've been on stream, in 7th. But the positive there is that he has done one more stop, or that car has done one more stop than its rivals, so that may come back into play a little bit later on. You've got the Hall duo of Danny and Matt Hall for WUGA Racing, UGA Motorsports in the Aston Martin, currently in 8th position. Bad on brand for that car has been steady but unspectacular in their first staging of the Schwitzer Racing League Endurance Series, more of which will hopefully become apparent in the coming weeks. You've got there, that's Visa in the Jamaica Connection Evil Racing division. Well, this is a bit of a triumph, really, for persistence, because this car was nowhere. They were 13th in the initial staging, and then as the GT4 drivers started to dwindle for various reasons, they did rise up, but they were a long way back. And whilst they're still towards the rear of the GT4 field, there is at least some competition with car number, we're just going through here now, they're a lap, I think, behind, aren't they? Hall and indeed Breuer. I think it's car number 1 in front of them, which is Astorino in 6th position. So still a bit of difficulty, but they are still there plugging away. They're also in the way of Travaglioli's Ferrari at the moment, with 2 the two stops Ferrari, the second stop Ferrari, 13.9 seconds behind Corona in the MSA Racing Ford Mustang. The MSA Racing team both in the lead with Erkelin-Çoglu at the moment, and with Corona in 5th position in that Mustang. Currently a strong showing there, with a bit of a field shake-up, if you like, with Bloom and Schwitzer Motorsport, especially at 555 Porsche, really paying the price for that. So don't know whether this is likely to stand. I would suggest that it will, because it is just force majeure, isn't it? You know, you prepare everything for a 10-hour race, and then the ACC servers decide that it's not going to happen. And fair play to all of the drivers and teams that have stuck with this. It would have been easy for them to lose their heads, but by and large, they have behaved impeccably in the Discord chat. So credit to all drivers and teams for their understanding. You've got Maserati now, who's stuck behind Go. Now, these are a lap down from Bloom, so are they going to get out of Bloom's way? You want to think that they will, but very often racing drivers get swept up in their own battle and don't necessarily notice what's going on around them, as you've got Maserati trying to pass Goat while simultaneously being lapped. You can see there's some scrapes down that Ferrari there, so there is a bit of damage, while simultaneously being lapped by Bloom. Now, they want to get out of the way sooner rather than later, otherwise they could find themselves in for a penalty, and further in for a penalty will be Maserati, I suspect. Yeah, Maserati making a bit of contact on the entrance to the Dunlop curve, and that's one way to get out of the way. Bit of contact with Go there, as Go does emerge ahead, with Bloom now still yet to lap the 9th place McLaren. Maserati, who had briefly got ahead going into the Dunlop curve, unfortunately finding himself in the sand there after a little bit of body contact. Two cars wide there. Never really going to work with the position that the McLaren was in, and I would suspect that will be brushed off by the stewards here. Now we've got, as Go, does he get out of the way? Well, he's had blue flags for nearly a lap, as Bloom now, understandably, a bit frustrated behind there, takes to the grass. Will the McLaren let him through? If he's got any sense, he will. He goes down the inside, and he doesn't have any sense, it would appear, because as soon as I said if he does have any sense, he'll let him through. He turns in, and that's a clumsy crash. Daniel Bloom for the Schwitzer Motorsport. Well, that is a microcosm for how that race has panned out for that team, because it's cars a lap down, battling away, and they've spun the Porsche, who was running so highly earlier. He's now in 7th place. He's got a lot of work to do to catch back up, not only to the lapped cars, of which they're 2.5 seconds apart now, but also the cars in front. He's lost, I would suggest, about 10 seconds to Travaglioli, Corona, Hansen, Hookhausen and Co. Erkelin-Çoglu, meanwhile stretching his lead to 20.6 seconds over Hannes Rust, with Hookhausen a little bit further back. We're just trying to see if we can see Hannes Rust now going through. I think that is turn 2, isn't it? It's devil to see with all this spray. And Hookhausen, 23.7 seconds behind in that Ford Mustang. So still a lot of ways that this can play out, with an hour and a half, or basically an hour and 45 minutes to go. We're effectively halfway through the restage race. So Hookhausen there, 23.7 seconds. I wonder if they can start to ease in with that car having looked so quick earlier on today, despite the various issues that they've had throughout the day. Meanwhile, plain sailing up front for Erkelin-Çoglu. The MSA 414 BMW is streaking away here. He's already going to second on this lap to Hannes Rust. As Rust, I think, has negotiated some GT4. He has. He's just got past the GT4 McLaren. That, I think, is Tom Breuer in car number 5, but we will just double check that now. It is Tom Breuer who's gotten out of the way there as best as he possibly can. Difficult for traffic management for the GT4 and the GT3 drivers, because it's usually assumed that the GT4 drivers can take the racing line and have priority as the slower class, and it is to the GT3 drivers to pass them. But there is always a little bit of a dance with this, in that sometimes the GT4 drivers will gently nudge themselves or get out of the way, and there'll be sometimes where GT3 drivers perhaps take a little bit more caution and care going past the GT4. It's all about traffic management, and some drivers are better at it than others. We're looking at Hannes Rust now to see if we can see the gap to Erkelin-Çoglu, who's already well into the first sector, just round turn 2. Meanwhile, the McLaren crosses the line. It was 20 and odd seconds. It's now 22.8. So 2 seconds lost there by the McLaren. Zerklin-Choglu very much thriving in these conditions. Now, they had a few issues early on in the first hour or so with tyre temperature and pressure, where it was a little bit less wet. It was a little bit, slightly lighter rain, which meant that if you slightly overpressure your wets, which is a lot easier to do, then you need to go and cool them down. So what he was doing was not necessarily trying to break the toe, but every single time he went down the straight, he was off the racing line trying to cool those wets down. No such issues here, with it teeming down in the Eifel Mountains as we tick over to 50 laps in the next minute or so. Let's just take a look and see. I think Elias de Vos has parked that Hispania Racing Ferrari. That's down and out with 4 stops to make. So Hispania Racing, they had a bit of an up and down start to this race. Certainly the initial staging, it's all a bit up and down. It's very much going in one direction, I'm afraid, for that car. The 199 Ferrari in strife in the second staging of this race. They are now, are they parking that or are they leaving? It looks like the car is setting off. Okay, so 3 stops to go, but only 1 hour and 45 in which to make them. So an hour and 3/4 to do 3 pit stops seems to me like that car is well out of contention. So speaking of a car that's towards the back, it's Goat now in the Apex GT entry for McLaren. Now, 1 stop to make, but a little bit further back, as he's caught, I think, a Mercedes GT4. Let's just see who that is just quickly. I think that's car 110, Adrian Durr. That car having a lot of issues earlier on in terms of trying to get started. All reset, even if they are towards the back, but they had a lot of issues earlier on in terms of trying to get the car out of the pit lane, so they lost 4 or 5 laps early on. Doesn't look like that's changed, to be fair. Doesn't look like that's changed, even if we've had that reset. So again, further problems for Adrian Durr in the Gridline Motorsport entry. We're now seeing, I think, where a couple of cars are pitted. Yes, so you can see the leader in GT4 is pitted. This is the true leader, which is now being handed over to Sergio Fernandez. It is Hernandez. I can't quite see because of the small writing. Need to get my glasses on. Sergio Hernandez having taken over from Jose Garcia in the Velocity Racing Mercedes AMG GT4 entry, which has been the class of the field, it must be said, for about most of these 10 hours. Going around the final corner now, a couple of cars in front who have 2 stops to make. We'll see exactly how far they are ahead, and it's 5 seconds behind Flessler, who's third, or a net third in GT4. This really is a pretty prodigious pace from Sergio Hernandez. Carrying on the good work of Garcia early on. We've got Neyring ahead in the Camaro, which is starting to look a little bit more like the Camaro I used to know in terms of how tricky it is to drive in the wet. But an excellent job from Schwitzer Motorsport's 4th entry, the 2nd GT4 entry, stroking his way now round the Ford chicane, and having built a bit of a gap, I think, over the cars behind. I think he's got 9 seconds over Flessler, and he's got 14 over Hernandez, although it must be said that Hernandez has got 1 fewer pit stop to make, so that is more like a 45-second loss to the car in the lead. De Vos is back in the pits once again for Ferrari, for the Hispania Racing team, Nexus Junior team. 199 Ferrari perhaps getting another quick pit stop out of the way, having failed to get any of his 4 mandated pit stops out of the way in the first half. So I think we're seeing a little bit of team tactics here from the last of us, although it does seem to me to be a little bit futile. We go up now to the lead. Johannes Rust has lost a couple of seconds in the last couple of laps, hasn't he? To Ekele just beginning to stretch out that lead in the MSA 414 BMW entry. That car has been uber quick throughout most of this race, especially with Carlos having that prodigious stint, didn't he? And an excellent stint second hour, where he gained half a minute on the leaders around him. Herkhausen there, 22 seconds off of second place, Rust in second place, so it does appear that it's spaced out just for the moment. The real car to watch at the moment is Travaglioli, so I would estimate about a minute off of the pace, of probably more than that, isn't he? Probably more like 1.5 minutes off the pace, so not an immediate danger to Erkin, but when the pit stop cycle, it may well be that that Ferrari is at least within touching distance, or at least within half sight of that BMW out in the lead. Erkin getting away again, 25.1 seconds over Hannes Brust, and that looks like it's going to increase further, with Herkhausen also catching Rust from behind. So Rust does need to pick up the pace just a little bit, because maybe 22 seconds, but you've got over 90 minutes of a race to go, and there may be further consequences for that car. You've got Hansen as well in the 100 Porsche entry. Been a bit up and down, hasn't it, for the 100 Porsche entry, with the Bremsbach and Spreiser team having led at various points, having then dropped back 2 or 3 laps off the pace to now being back into 4th position. Been a bit of a roller coaster 10 hours for this entry, but it does look like Hansen's brought a sense of calm and normality to proceedings for them. As I say, that he just about kisses the apex, keeps himself out of harm's way on that curve. You can see the wet rain absolutely bucketing it down. And is he moving over to try and cool his wets? If so, then he's done rather well to overpressure them, hasn't he? Because that track looks incredibly damp. As we can see now, Hannes Rust started to pick up that pace, maintaining the gap 25.4 seconds last time around. Now, if we can see how quickly Herkhausen's catching, Herkhausen's just about, well, he's crossed the line, and so it is 21.9 seconds. That is a very real gap, as he is negotiating some GT4 cars. Now, that GT4 was the 5, that is, I think that might even be Tom Breuer. It is Tom Breuer in the car number 1 as he spins around there, and that is a pretty hopeless incident there. That has ended the Schwitzer Motorsport Challenge, you would suggest, for the victory. Herkhausen there drops it at turn 3, and then is ran into by Tom Breuer for good measure. Tom Breuer in the 5 McLaren GT4 entry, nowhere really to go, but that could be costly in terms of Herkhausen's hopes for a podium, with Travaglioli catching again. So that will cost him about 10 seconds. We'll see now as Rust has dropped back to 26 seconds now. Herkhausen, how much time has that cost him? It was roughly 22 seconds, wasn't it, going across? So we'll see exactly where we're at now. He's trying to see if he can cool his tyres down. I'm not surprised about that, with how much heat that would have been generated there. Wets are generally softer. 36.8 seconds. So pretty terminal for the hopes for a race win. And with Travaglioli now starting to clear other cars that are pitting, that may prove to be pretty terminal for their podium hopes. We're now looking at Hansen having left the pit lane. He's behind Garona going through the Ford curve. You've got Travaglioli and Blum in the Schwitzer Racing Porsche. I think he's going to come out. Where's he going to come out? I think he's ahead of those, isn't he? So he's cycling back down to about 7, I would imagine. 6th place, I would imagine, with Blum a little bit further out of the picture. That's right as well. Let's just see him. I think that's goose is cooked, isn't it? He's going to finish probably no higher than 8th position, unless dramas occur. Have that car having been 4th at one point, having lost nearly a minute in the second hour to various issues, then losing a full lap to further issues, having spun off, and now back in 8th position, having recovered so well from what was a poor second hour for that car. And the Ferrari there just limping home now for the remaining hour and a half. Jörg Majorat trying to wring its neck, but that car, severely damaged on the left-hand side, is not going to be a happy car. So we can see that the rain is starting to ease in the next 10 to 30 minutes. Doesn't look like it's going to ease an awful lot, but that might just affect the track conditions very slightly. The track tends to be quite sensitive to, even the lightest change in rain. So even if it doesn't ease up by too much, you can find these going 1 to 2 seconds quicker, which will generate more heat and make the tyres a little bit more difficult to manage. So something to watch for in the next half an hour as we very rapidly head towards 90 minutes to go. So, with the new order somewhat restored, we've got David Manifeld back in the Porsche, the car 100 Bremsbackenspreiser entry. He's now in 6th position, a little way back from Travaglioli. You can see that he's going through the Dunlop curve, whereas Travaglioli very quickly chasing Garona in the MSA Racing Ford Mustang. The Mustang, who has had a bit of an up and down race, but has a bit of a reprieve, obviously, with the restart from before. And Travaglioli now 5.5 seconds behind as they went through the second or the final sector. And it's still 5.5 seconds. That Ferrari, though, is starting to get his skates on. Just seeing as well, Hannes Rust dropping back to 27 seconds nearly behind Erkelin-Çoglu. Erkelin-Çoglu just about stretching his legs in that BMW, with Hannes Rust gamely holding on. And then you've got Herkhausen 37 seconds back. That spin there, just a couple of laps to go, really putting pay to any hopes of a victory and possibly making a podium even more difficult with the advancing Travaglioli. Travaglioli now 5.5 seconds behind Garona. Garona, meanwhile, not that far behind Herkhausen. Herkhausen in car 64. We're just trying to see exactly where they are as they go through the sector beam. There's Garona in the black and yellow Mustang with some that silver. Looks well, it's 30.7 seconds. Okay, so Herkhausen will come out and cycle behind Travaglioli because he typically loses about half a minute in the pits, come what may, before any stop. So Travaglioli's running, it looks like a net third, 5.2 seconds off of the back of the Mustang. But is he biding his time, and has he got further ambitions at plays? He's going to have to go some to catch Rust and İlkay Erkelin-Çoglu. Erkelin-Çoglu in the 414 BMW, stretching his lead even further now to 27 seconds, whereas Rust is a comfortable second at the moment. I don't think that Virtual Pro Racing will jump him in the pits, but they may get him on pace a little bit later on. Fabio Travaglioli, certainly a specialist in that Ferrari. We're going to go now to the top of the GT4 class, and Hernandez 18 seconds now. He's second in the Velocity Racing Team Mercedes. But he's 18 seconds off of Neyring. Neyring in the Schwitzer Motorsport Camaro. Not expected to challenge for victory, and he's probably going to fall short. But he is running second in an excellent display here. They all have put together a very good job. This car was quick in the initial staging of the race as well. They were running in the top four all race long, with Hernandez now 18 seconds behind. So when Neyring does pit to hand over or to get that car serviced in the next half an hour, we expect, then he will have to, well, he will cede the lead, and Hernandez and Garcia will end up taking the lead there. So Velocity Racing Team in a really healthy position, provided that connection, provided everything holds out, having been walking home pretty much. So we're a lap ahead of everybody else earlier on. So it's sometimes when you then lose it to a red flag like this, he does go slightly wide as soon as I start praising him. Sometimes when you lose it in a red flag situation like this, it can be very, very difficult to keep focus. So credit has to go to the two drivers for simply getting their heads down, getting on with the job, and focusing to take what should be a fairly simple victory, provided they keep everything pointing in the same direction and provided they don't have any connection gremlins. We've got now a battle, I think, between the two Mercedes. That is Patrick Fleshner in the Gridline Motorsports 222 entry, car number 222. And that is then Stefan Sherman in the Schwitzer Motorsport, the third entry, the first of the GT4 entries so far. Now, going into the Dunlop curb, where can he force a mistake? Because Fleshner has been losing a lot of time quite quickly to them. I would suggest that Sherman will be pretty keen to get this done, to maybe see if he can impact things up ahead. Sherman now going through the Schumacher S. He's not going to get anything done there, but he might be able to land a blow on the brakes. He goes to the outside of Fleshner, and is that formation flying? Fleshner stays to the inside. It's definitely not formation flying. Both drivers go deep, and I think Sherman has gone off the track. We can't see whether he's gained the place. You would suggest not, and that is confirmed by the appearance of Fleshner coming into screen now. So, a bit of a brave attempt around the outside there, especially in wet conditions where grip is at a premium for the Schwitzer Motorsport, and he compounds that grip error or issue by going into the gravel, saves it, and he's got 36 seconds to the car behind. So whilst he is 2.5 seconds now down on Fleshner, once he refocuses, you would expect that to improve. That is Manafeld now in 6th position in GT3, coming up to lap him, so I would suggest that he'll be ceding position, perhaps going into the first corner, as we can see that the leader, İlkay Erkalin-Çoglu, has pitted for the 414 MSA Racing team. So this is where we start to see whether or not that strategy is going to work. You would expect that it will, because he's got quite a gap over Hannes Rust, who's also come into the pits recently in the Lomaxo Esports second entry. Travaglioli, who is 4 seconds out behind fourth place man Garona. So you'll start to see whether how exactly this pans out. As you can see now, the Mercedes GT4 entry of Stefan Sherman now getting back to Patrick Fleshner. Fleshner now 3 seconds ahead, but with the GT3 car to lap going potentially past him into the Dunlop curve that we're now heading to. No, I don't think he's going to quite make it, but I suspect that will come into play a little bit later on. So Herkhausen now a minute off of the pace so far for Erkalin-Çoglu, although with Erkalin-Çoglu now having left the pits, or the 414 car having left the pits, they're now together. You've got Rust, who is a further 24 seconds back, so that figures, with them both having done largely the same stop, as Garona now pits to release Travaglioli. Travaglioli now, this is where he gets the hammer down. He's 8.5 seconds behind Rust. It's not quite where the Italian was expected to be, so we'll see now what pace the Italian has against the McLaren ahead. Herkhausen, meanwhile, in the 444 entry, the Schwitzer Motorsports GT3 Mustang entry. Bit of a sitting duck on the podium, because whilst he is running second, as that is Silth now taking the BMW to the penultimate stop. You've got Silth there leading by 1.3 seconds to Herkhausen. Herkhausen, with that spin a little bit earlier on, really haven't taken himself out of contention for a race win. I would suggest leaving himself very vulnerable to attack from Travaglioli and Rust for a position. He was behind Rust to begin with, but Travaglioli was just about out of range before that happened. So Travaglioli now, time to get the hammer down. He's just going into the Dunlop curve. He's 8.7 seconds behind Rust, so you would assume that is a fairly safe net third position, with Herkhausen yet to enter the pits. You would expect him to be coming in soon, because you've got 1 hour and 25 minutes to do 3 pit stops. So it's effectively every half an hour from this point onwards, unless there is a couple of short pits, you know, potentially sort of 1 litre of fuel, which teams are allowed to do. There's nothing in the rules against that. But he is now, let's see here, 1.5 seconds off of Sills. Sills just about getting himself into the swing of things once again. I think sometimes as a driver, especially in conditions like this, you do need a lap to break yourself in, and that's exactly what's happening here. So Rust now 8.5 seconds clear of Travaglioli, with Manifeld a lot further back, I think it's fair to say, going through. That is a horrendous angle. I cannot tell you enough how bad an angle that is through the Schumacher S's, but it does tell me that he is at least a considerable distance away. You think the car number 100 is chasing car 41, and I would suggest there is nearly a minute in it between the two. We'll certainly see that maybe a little bit later on, just depending on ACC's wonderful timing matrix, with Honkhausen now, I think he's starting to drop back a little bit from the ever quick 4:14 entry for David Sills now, who is, I think now, 1.7 seconds, so it's just 2/10 here and there. So I'm still trying to work out what the tactics might be for anyone still with 3 stops to go. I reckon maybe it's 1 full stop and then maybe a couple of stops just for 1 litre. It's difficult to really work out between or what they're all looking to do. So that's certainly something that we'll try and cover in a bit more detail as and when we can, as the Cayman there gets out of the way. Astorino doing his very best into the corner. Difficult to ease off here with the spray as it is, and 2 cars not knowing 100% where you are, so all drivers conducted themselves with to the letter of the law there. So we've got, as he goes slightly wide there, that was a bit of a hairy moment. Excellent car control from Honkhausen, and not the first time he's had a little bit of a leery moment there. Goes over the curbs as well. That looks pretty simple. Is he going to come into the pits? No. Rides the curve a little bit, but goes into the final corner. 1.1 seconds behind after the intervention of that GT4 car. And we now wait to see exactly how this plays out. Sills building a gap again at 1.3 seconds, with Rust now just coming over the line now. We'll start to see whether that gap is starting to close or not. Ditto Travaglioli. Well, it's 8.2 seconds, so it's not closing really at the rate that you want, with a couple of tenths here and there each lap. It isn't really closing as you'd like it to. So Rust now 22.7 seconds behind Honkhausen, so 24 seconds behind Sills, who's had a bit of a rotten time with traffic just these last couple of laps. Take a look now at the battle potentially for 5th place. Both of these drivers are, and it's not including the GT4 that's currently in front of Blue, in the Schwitzer Motorsport Porsche, with the earlier issues for that car having taken it out of contention when it looked prodigiously fast throughout. Now we've got Manifeld in the blue and orange Porsche, 4.2 seconds ahead. This will be a battle to keep an eye on as the racing goes on. You've got O'Reilly in the MSA racing Ford, that's had a bit of a reprieve, about 9 seconds behind, so not a factor at the moment, but may come into play a little bit later on. Manifeld 47.4 seconds behind Travaglioli ahead, and only 3.6 seconds ahead of Blue. So we're going to stay with this over the course of the coming laps and try and see if we can get a battle, because the 2 Porsches very much converging, aren't they, in the, let's say we're going into the sort of the final third of the race, aren't we? 3.5 hours, and we're now, with 1 hour and 20 minutes to go. So certainly towards the final third of this race. Manifeld's gamely hanging on, isn't he, at the moment? That's doesn't look like an easy Porsche to drive as we go into the 4 curve. Let's just see how this looks, and it all looks fine through there. It doesn't look particularly leery, but he does miss the apex at the 4 curve. Not bad unless you can fire yourself off of the banking on that corner, but you don't want to be too wide. Gap currently 3.6 seconds. Let's see how quickly this comes down. I think it's come down a fair bit. It has. A further 7 tenths in the first sector, less than 3 seconds. So we're going to stay with this. He does get a little bit wide on the outside curb coming out of the Dunlop curve, and then misses the apex at the Schumacher S's, so he can start to hear, and he'll start to be aware of Blue behind. Blue now in the ascendancy in terms of pace? Will he be in the ascendancy in terms of position in the next few moments? Bit of a response from Manifeld there, isn't it? It says it stabilises the gap over the last couple of sectors. Bloom just about keeping the back end in check coming out of turn one. It's been particularly difficult. It's a difficult enough corner in the drive with how it dips into the first apex, but in the wet especially, has proven to catch a couple of the drivers out with the heavier rain that we've had in the second race. So, Bloom now in the Porsche. You can see the car in front. I think it's sector one where he's really getting his work done. So we'll see now how much he's taken off of the Porsche in front. You can see visibly he's caught even on this lap. So Bloom 2.9 seconds behind at the moment. This is the battle for 5th place. We'll take a look at the lead gap in just a moment, but I want to stay with this because going into the Dunlop curve it's 1.7 seconds, 1.2 seconds in the first sector. So Bloom now very much hot on the heels of Manifeld going into the last hour and 18 minutes. Both drivers now have 2 pit stops to make, so it's a straight fight between these two crews, but Bloom, having looked so good earlier on, want to be in the top 5. He'll want to try and make a point to those who maybe thought that he could have won earlier on to say, yeah, do you know what, I could have. As it is at the moment, the Germans fighting for 5th place, with Manifeld now ahead in the 100 Porsche. What's the car handling like? Because it doesn't look too bad here. It doesn't look like he's lost an awful lot of time now going into the chicane. We're just about to find out. 1.6 seconds, yeah, just a further 2/10, and that will be regained somewhat by Daniel Bloom going off in the Porsche in the chicane now, because he's got a little bit too leery, didn't he, going into the final chicane. Got offline and has to cut the track. I suspect that will have cost just a bit of time there. Yeah, it's lost basically the second that he had gained. Still a net gain for the Schwitzer Motorsport entry, but it could have been a lot more. So he's basically reset himself for this race. Meanwhile, Herkhausen does appear to have picked up his pace in the Mustang. Still got 3 stops to make in an hour and 15, so I'm not quite sure where this is going unless it's going to be a big stop for fuel, so a stop to effectively fill the car up to the end, although it must be getting a little bit empty with it being 2.5 hours nearly since the race started, as he's 1.9 seconds now off of the leading BMW. But I'm just struggling to see whether or not this is going to be worth it, because he's effectively going to pass through the pits now 3 times, which will add 30 seconds on come what may. Plus you've got 1 more stop, so he's got effectively 2 minutes to add on, whereas the rest of the drivers in front have a lot less time than that. We have a stop-go penalty for Adrian Dürr in the Grid Line Motorsport entry, car 110. That's last in GT4 anyway, so a stop-go penalty, not the end of the world really in terms of their race. Their race already in trouble to begin with, so no issues there. We'll keep you updated of any other penalties as well as they come through and try and explain those as best we can. So we've got now, I think that's Breuer, isn't it, in the McLaren, who is doing a decent job in the, is that car number 5? It's not Breuer, is it now anymore? It might be Kramer in the car number 5 McLaren. Nicely out of the way of Silth, although Silth does cut across as soon as he gets past the GT4. You don't really want to be doing that, because it only takes a GT4 to lose grip or to lose a reference point, and he's back into the back of you. So still they're taking a risk, but it doesn't really hurt him. especially as Herkhausen still has to get past the GT4 McLaren. He does so on the brakes going into the Audi chicane, and that should be a fairly comfortable hold for him, so he can set off again after the BMW, even if he is a pit stop behind in effect for that Mustang team. So we're going to go back now to Bloom, who's lost a little bit of his rhythm, hasn't he? You know, he's 2.9 seconds. He was catching by over a second a lap at one point, this car. Maybe he might have punched himself out in terms of the tyres, or might well be that the exploits of especially that chicane may have reared their ugly heads once again. He has had a couple of off-track excursions, let's say, in pursuit of his Porsche stablemate in front. Car 100, David Malafeld is doing a solid but steady job, isn't he, in 5th place. His pace wasn't particularly poor earlier, and despite the fact that Hoffman has been the lead driver in terms of pace, he's not let the team down. It was just that awful pit stop earlier on that really did set them back. It's academic now because obviously it's a new race effectively, with only this race counting, but it does certainly speak to a solid job done by the Bremsbracken-Schweizer team in the Porsche 911 GT3, car number 100. Still holding on, even if he has lost half a second. Partly, I suspect, to GT3 cars in the second sector. You've got the McLaren 213 McLaren of Visa, the Jamaica Connection Evil Racing there in 8th place in GT4. And yeah, the gap now down to 1.7 seconds. But again, more issues for Bloom in the chicane as he goes rally crossing there, getting bolts behind the McLaren GT4 entry. Nothing a GT4 driver could do, just caught at the wrong place at the wrong time. But Bloom taking evasive action, and that is further time lost for the German. Yeah, now 4 seconds, so it's I think a good 2.2 seconds lost going off the track there. So again, got it all to do now. There's a couple more GT4s rejoin. I think, yeah, that's Durr who's come out serving his stop-go penalty. He comes in behind, and eventually the Porsche clears the McLaren. So the McLaren there causing, not really through any fault of his, to be honest with you, but the McLaren does cause a bit of an obstacle for Bloom. Now 4 seconds to go, there's another Aston Martin in front. I think that's Kropidlovsky in the Effect Motorsport Aston Martin, with Loyek in the 222 Mercedes. Remember, that car was amongst the lead group in the initial staging. Just behind that, now just take a look at the must be Kropidlovsky in the Effect Motorsport Aston Martin. So that's the only one still running at the moment. Oh, is it? No, might well be Hall. Let's have a look. I think that might well be Hall, especially with Weezer only 2 seconds behind. Here it is Hall. So apologies there to the Effect Motorsport. Here's the Effect Motorsport in its yellow and green glory in 5th in class, just behind Astorino in that vitalised Scuderia 5 racing. The Porsche really has come to the fore, because it was a pretty poor start for this team. But they did keep going. They kept going, and they've improved slowly, regardless of the fact that we've had a race that's been interrupted and then red flagged. There was 6 or so at the time that the initial race began. So it's certainly not been a fluke that this team have gotten over those issues. We've got Neyring now further ahead. He's 16 seconds up the road, 10.2 seconds off the lead, with him having pitted. And it's just then out of sequence in the top 3. It is Sven Schirmann in the Schwitzer Motorsport Mercedes. So, plain sailing really for the lead GT4 car. That's Hernandez. So currently shown as 11th overall, but the lead GT4 car of Sergio Hernandez. The Velocity Racing team, I've waxed lyrical already, I'm going to do it again. The pace that this car has shown throughout the 10-hour race, we tick over to hour 9's completion within the next 10 minutes. The pace that this entry has shown for GT4 standards all the way through. There was that battle with Airesh earlier on, wasn't there, between Garcia and Hernandez, but it has been largely pain and trouble-free once they broke free of that Airesh squabble, with Hernandez now crossing the line, whilst Schirmann in car 404 is about about half a minute behind. He's trying to let the Ferrari go, isn't he? Going up the hill. The Ferrari should pass him. That's Travaglioli, who's currently in third position. We said that he might go back into the podium paying positions once the stops all shaked out, and that is how it's turned out. But he's currently third, only 7 seconds behind Travaglioli, as Schirmer now comes into the pits from second place in GT4. I would expect that he'll come out round about Loyeg. That's kind of the race at the moment, with Astorino still to come in for a pit stop. So that's certainly one to watch later on. Travaglioli now 7.9 seconds behind Russ, so starting to make very slight inroads, isn't he? Don't get me wrong, this is not groundbreaking. It's a 10th here and there on a couple of laps as he power slides his way through. It almost looks like turn 2. You don't want to be doing that too many times. These wet tyres are fragile. Johannes Geerts then coming around the final corner. Let's see where he figures now in all of this, with the Mustang having pitted a little bit earlier on. Johannes Geerts now 36 seconds nearly behind Travaglioli, so you would expect that that team, with the various small dramas and misdemeanors that they've had, certainly since we've been covering, affecting them and probably taking them out of podium contention. Meanwhile, Hans Rust is starting to close the gap just a little bit. That may be traffic related, but we'll hang on to it for the moment, because Hans Rust has got 24 seconds behind Silth. Silth was being kept honest by the Mustang, the Schwitzer Motorsport Mustang, or when they were trying to cycle through in terms of pits. So it may well be that, but Silth just playing his way in at the moment. There's no need to do anything daft, but Hans Rust sensing a small opportunity, I see here. So he goes up the hill now. He's going to go into the final corner, but he won't know the time. Yeah, it's going to go to 66 laps. We won't know exactly how far he is behind till he gets probably to the start-finish line, because it just says 1 lap, which is wrong. But we'll stick with this until the final sector finishes, so we cross the start-finish line, and we'll see exactly how far back he was. It was 24 seconds before. Where are we looking now? As it is with the lap, 23.9. So not groundbreaking, far from it, but the 10th off here and there, and Rust might be in with a very small shout, with this entry having looked completely hopeless at one point. Lomaxo, both of them struggling earlier on. Rust now really bringing this car certainly into podium contention and possibly in contention for a win. Lomaxo Esports having done a real good job to recover not only the initial staging, but since then this car, especially as it's got wetter, has looked a lot better balanced. So 23.9 seconds it is, as Silth has just broken the time limit for the first sector. So we'll stay with this because we're not far from there at all, going round the Ford chicane. Do need to hook it really to the inside there. He's done that perfectly, so that you've got enough banking to run off of and provide a bit of momentum down the hill. Can't get your braking wrong here. You can't really brake too late, because if you do, you're off the banking and into the gravel. Stabilises at about 24 seconds, so we'll keep an eye on that as that goes through. If there's anything that drops again, then we'll be on it. We're having a look here now at what I think is, how's this happened? That is the Hispania Racing Team hitting again in the Ferrari, and that is that far out of sequence that that's Jimeno, isn't it? Sergio Jimeno in the Hispania Racing Team Ferrari. That far out of sequence, they're now lapping with GT4 cars, having pitted what feels like nearly 4 times in the hour just gone. So bit of a strange strategy, it must be said, but perhaps there's been some damage induced within that, or damage-induced pit stops within that. Next up the road is Gruner, who had that poor second hour for the team, which is kind of where the reason why they dropped off before, but he has recovered it. He looked a lot better in the middle part of this race, just before the red flag put pay to this car's hopes of a top 4 finish. So Gruner now looking to see what he can recover. The cars in front of him, the two in front of him, have all pitted one more time than him, but where are we in comparison to the Mustang in the car 415? The answer is quite far back. It's about a whole minute, isn't it? So this car's just going to have to keep its head down and hope for the best on that one. as we can see now, Travaglioli's 10.7 seconds behind Rust. Rust really has found some pace. It's 22.7. That's a further 1.3 seconds out of Sills. And he's certainly getting away from Travaglioli, when perhaps I expected that he might be falling back into the Italian's clutches. Travaglioli has a little bit of clear air at the moment, doesn't he? Can't 2-1. It's just the 555 machine for Schwitzer Motorsport. That's Stefan Dahmer, isn't it, in the Porsche? Just him to head to clear, but that car has been pretty quick despite its somewhat lowly position now. I think we can see now that Sergio Jimeno has now left the pits, so it's 16th overall and 10th in GT3, but it has completed all of his pit stops. Not sure it'll work out for them. I suspect they will still come home in last, beyond or barring any issues. We can see now Rust 22.4 seconds, so the gap is starting to come down. Is it enough though, with an hour and 4 minutes to go and 2 pit stops for all of these teams to make? The pit stops are so easy to get wrong here, and I say this as someone who has gotten the pit stops right about once in his entire ACC career. But if you mess the pit stops up, if you overshoot, you lose probably 5 seconds there and then. Doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're battling with 22 seconds and one car has got a pace advantage over the other, that suddenly turns into quite something. As Rust now comes around the final corner to complete the lap 68, 21.9, it's coming down, isn't it? What was 22.7, 8 tenths found that previous lap. So that at this rate would be enough, provided there's no dramas, for them to catch Sills. Sills has got to get his skates on, because otherwise he may come under a trap. Travaglioli now comes into the pits for an early stop for the Ferrari. I suspect that'll be full fuel to the end and potentially a splash and dash a little bit later on. Will they take tyres? Not so sure they will as he comes into the pits, but we'll keep an eye on that a little bit later on. There's Jonas Gertz going round the final corner. He will inherit third place for the moment, but not on merit at this moment in time, as Gertz now comes around the final corner, crosses the line. What was 27 seconds, it would have been about 30 seconds before Travaglioli came back into the pits. The Italian still at the end of the pit lane, so he will cycle back to, I think, possibly 6th, I would say, with Stefan Dahmer going around the full curve. So it will be 6th place for Travaglioli or the Virtual Pro Racing team when they do eventually leave. 22 seconds now for Hannes Rust, so no real difference in the first sector, but it has been the second sector where the McLaren has got its work done since we rejoined the race. Now we rejoin with Hannes Rust there, taking a further second out of Silth in the remaining lap. That's 21.1 seconds in the last, so 1 second effectively in the last 2 sectors. It is starting to close up. We'll keep an eye on that once again with O'Reilly now. Not far off the back of Malafeld in the Porsche. O'Reilly stealthily building his way. That car, that 415, has the fastest lap. It's been really quick, but it has been beset by issues one way or the other. We can see O'Reilly there going through the final chicane into the Coca-Cola curve, the final corner. Now, this could be a battle, and a slightly more immediate one than the one we've got up in front. Russ is taking another half a second now, but O'Reilly, with Malafeld having pitted, now assumes 4th position. With Barile now, having taken over from Travaglioli to take the Ferrari home into the final hour we go. The relay there for Virtual Pro Racing Cornero, the 41 car, which I remind you had disconnected and was out of the race, brought back in because of the red flag, which effectively reset the grid and the running order. Beneficiary of that, but you take your luck and you have to make sure you maximise it. Currently in 5th place with Manafeld now having come into the pits. You're going to start to see those who have 2 stops to go coming in for some fuel, coming in for splash and dash. Some will come in perhaps to change tyres. Some will come in to maybe top up the tanks and then come in for another 1 litre fill. We don't know quite how this is going to go, but Silt, having been down to 19 seconds, has come into the pits. Was 14 across the line, won't pay too much heed to that, but it had gone below 20 seconds, so the 414 BMW picks the ideal time to pit. Now that is Hannes Rust in the lead, now in the Lamaxo Esports McLaren, which says 11, but is also 591. Answers on a postcard if you can work that out. With Janus Gertz in the Ford Mustang, car 444, going through the final chicane. Is he going to pass Silt? I would suggest the 414 BMW is going to be passed, although not obviously on the road. Silt now leaves, or the 414 BMW leaves the pit lane at pit lane speed. Gertz isn't quite going to pass him, so that's pretty crucial, because Silt is going to come out behind the McLaren GT4 entry, car number 5. That is Kramer, who they might have had a few issues with earlier, but Kramer there obeying the gentleman's code, isn't it, between GT3 and GT4, staying well out of the way. And now we wait to see, because Silt will be, because Gertz is 59.4 seconds behind. I don't know whether that's to the leader, I'm not sure it is. Silt is now, let's see, it's about a minute, isn't it? But that's largely pit stop related. There was 20 seconds in hand for Rust and for the 414 entry, who we will find out who is at the wheel after the first sector beam coming up. So I'm going to stay with Silt, allegedly, going into the Dunlop curve as he crosses the line, and it is Carlos. Now, Carlos was rapid in the second hour of the race a little bit earlier on. He pulled out a gap over the field of about half a minute, with that car having fought all behind them for the best part of the first hour. Carlos has come in and provided a real steadying influence for this team. They'll be hoping that for the last hour it's him that can bring this home. 3.5 hour race this is, 2.5 hours just over in, and car 414 making its last move. Hannes Rust now has something to think about. Hannes Rust in the McLaren. I wonder if they're going to just fuel only from here. You may as well take the gamble and shorten your pit stop. So it might well be that they come in for 1 litre, then see exactly how many they need. Or it might well be that they fill the car up and then just pick their moment to see exactly what they can do in terms of then the splash and go and when that might look like. So Rust now going through the Ford curve, whereas car 414, which is Carlos, just crossed the line, 44.1. Now that is something to keep an eye on, as he nearly gets wiped out there by the Ferrari. That's Daltrey in the Hispania Racing Nexus Ferrari, nearly causing chaos and nearly wiping out the BMW 414, the current favourite for the win. And that could have been very nasty indeed. They survive, with the exception of, I think, the bruised pride of Daltrey, as he just rejoined the track. That front end beaten up, so I suspect that he went quite far in to the gravel trap and may not have saved it from the wall. So 18th place and currently last in GT3, currently 10th in GT3. Another man to have completed the pit stops is Goat in the Apex GT McLaren entry, car number 45. Bit far back to maybe challenge for a podium, but he could be, especially with Gruner two stops behind, effectively. Could well be perhaps into the top 8, maybe the top 7 once Dahmer and Hoffman come in. Hoffman now, who was the quickest driver so far for this 100 Porsche entry, he is now back in the car. and currently running in 6th position. We will check it and we'll make sure to keep you updated of the gaps and the drivers as and when they change. You've got Janus Geerts still driving the Schwitzer Motorsport. We're expecting Pascal Vuta might be getting back in the car when they do come in to change for the last time. With 2 stops to go for this Mustang, it will be that they swap to their quickest driver so far. Carlos now going through the final chicane, and he's giving it everything. A little bit too much there, isn't he? Just over the sleeping policeman. Not enough to really worry Carlos as he goes through the final corner, the Coca-Cola curve. Really irritating corner. Do you think Loughlill's bad? Just think you can turn more and more and more into that final corner, but turn too much and you're in the wall. 38.9 seconds. Okay, so that might be because Rust has come into the pit lane. Rust is pitted and he'll cycle out. How far will that be? Because he's got quite a bit of pit lane to work with down there. So that is, I don't really know. I think that might be 15 seconds. Coming out behind the McLaren, car number 5 McLaren are coming out ahead of Goat. Not Goat, it's Phantom this time. In the McLaren, the number 45 McLaren, the blue and purple vehicle. So we'll keep with this because Carlos will now take the lead. Geerts obviously just 0.7 seconds, 0.683 seconds behind as they try and navigate this McLaren GT4 car. Now, will he play ball? He won't. They'll have to go around the long way. That should be Rust. I'm not sure that it is, but they'll have to go around the long way. Car number 11, the Lamaxo entry. But I think it's one of those things that you catch him at the wrong place, and that can happen. So let's see what the gap is, because it was 19.7 seconds. But Carlos, as I say, has been prodigiously quick in the wet today. So Carlos there, well, it's 1.5 between Geerts and Carlos. It's 16.2 between Rust and Geerts. So nothing's really changed, and it is Hannes Rust who they've left in the car, the Lamaxo Esports second entry, as you can see on there. But he's in primary position to launch an attack. 18 seconds less than it is between Carlos and Geerts. They now go into the Audi chicane before they get onto the long straight and up the hill into the NGK chicane. So this will complete the second sector just a little bit further up. As Carlos has now gone through with Geerts 8 seconds behind, so the Ford driver has hit some dramas there, hasn't he? Because he was only half a second behind before they caught up to some GT4 runners. Rust there, 9.2. Okay, so 17.2 now. That gap's coming down, isn't it? So we've got a race on our hands, I think, for the last hour. It's just a case of how quickly this McLaren can catch Carlos, if he can catch Carlos, and whether he can maintain this pace. 8.9 seconds gets across the line. Rust 8.1 seconds. So again, 2/10 out from Rust to Carlos. So it's now 17 seconds and a couple of thousandths across the line. 51 minutes to go. So what's that? That'll be, mental maths, probably about 25 laps. It's doable, but it is improbable, because catching is one thing in endurance racing and passing very much another. We'll have to hope that Geerts doesn't put up a fight now, with Geerts now behind the Aston Martin, I think, of Stein. Kevin Stein back in the car there in 5th in GT4 with a pretty solid performance so far from Effect Motorsport and the yellow and green Aston Martin, getting out of the way there. But how much time has that cost Geerts? It will help us work things out. It's 9.3 seconds for Geerts to Carlos, but Rust to Carlos is the one that we're really looking at. So that is 7.8 seconds. So that is pretty much nip and tuck, isn't it? That is 17.1 seconds. Okay, so the gap stabilising out front at the moment. We'll stay with it going into the second sector. I just want to see if I can spot a pattern between first, second and third, because previously Rust was getting his work done in the latter half of the lap. He's got GT4 Cayman of the company. That Cayman does not look comfortable. Malizia 6th in GT4. Is he going to let the McLaren round the outside? Sensible driving from them if so, and it probably cost him a couple of tenths, no more. So excellent driving all round. Carlos has gone through the final sector, hasn't he? That is 8.9 seconds. We have now got a GT4 ahead in strife. I think that's the 110 of Adrian Durr getting back going again and that won't cause any issues for Rust. So 8.2 seconds behind Gertz. Gertz losing a bit of time. But what's Gertz doing in relation to Carlos? Carlos has crossed the line, 8.5 seconds, the gap between Jonas Gertz and Carlos, which means that is that's 7.8 seconds. That is 16.3 seconds. Gap's coming down in the second and third sectors, and the McLaren getting his work done in the latter part of the lap, and that's 3/4 of a second there. This fight is on with one pit stop each to go. It could come down to who doesn't mess the pit stops up, but I think we've got a race on our hands. The 444 Jonas Gertz, is that? No, that's not Jonas Gertz, is it? That's the 444. It is Jonas Gertz. 64 means 444, so that will make things easy to track, because Gertz, who was second on the road, now not second on the road, hitting a few dramas off the exit of turn 2. And Ford Mustang now must be surely thinking about coming in for another stop, at least to try and break up the rhythm, because it's not been a good couple of laps. Gertz now stuck behind the GT4, I suspect, of I think there might still be the Aston Martin, but we'll see that now as they come back through. 17.3 seconds now between Rust and Carlos. This will be the way to spot the pattern, because Carlos, rapid as he was earlier on, isn't showing the same pace. Rain is meant to ease off soon, but you can't really see that it's eased off too much. So I think this is going to be the conditions that we've got until the end. Carlos now going up the hill into the final sector, going into the NGK chicane up here, the slightly less aggressive version of the one that Formula 1 used to use. I think it's the old Formula 1 one, where Schumacher might have passed a Lacey all those years ago. So you've got Carlos now. I can't see anything wrong with the Beamer. It looks a little bit tail-endy on power there, but nothing really to be too worried about in the rain. 16.7 seconds. Okay, so 6/10 gone in the middle sector between Carlos and Rust. We'll see what that looks like across the line very shortly, as Rust is just coming up to some GT4 traffic in the final corner. He should get the Mercedes pretty easily. He's going to pass the Mercedes. That's the leader of the GT4 class there, and you've got then, I think that's the Schwitzer entry as well, who's third. Fourth, that's Hartmann, who's fourth in GT4 as well. He should pass both of them down the inside. It'll compromise him a bit, 16.5 seconds, but the GT4 does get out of the way, and he also gets out of the way, does he, of the class leader? No, he doesn't, but I suspect that Hernandez is going to round him around the outside already, or is he not? He's going to cut back to the inside. We're not going to stay with that, because that's lapped car on lead car. As you can see now, Travaglioli and Hoffman. Also, is that Travaglioli? No, that isn't. That's car 41. That's Barile, isn't it? Car 41 in fourth place. Isn't far away at all from Gertz, is he? So I think Gertz is looking more and more vulnerable in the Schwitzer Motorsport entry Ford. Now, as we tick over to, well, it's nearly midnight in the UK, so we're getting to 1:45 in Europe. So full marks here if you've stuck with this, because I appreciate it's a very late night. Rust there, yeah, you expected him to lose a little bit of time. 17 seconds back now. That's half a second gone, having had to pass those two GT4 cars, but he'll be relieved to see relatively clear track, because there's only two GT4 cars, never mind, not beyond between him and Carlos, but between him and the start-finish line. Car number one has gone off a little bit. That's Milizia in the Porsche Cayman's got back going again, and Carlos has caught a GT4 car going into the final chicane. I think he's just about dealt with him, but that's a distraction that Carlos could have done without now as he goes into the final corner. We're staying with this to try and see if we can keep an eye on the gaps. Yeah, he's just got past. That's car number 9 there, who's not shown as that. It's 17.1 seconds. So is the McLaren a bit of a busted flush, or is he just saving a bit of tyres? We've got now going through the NGK chicane into the final corner. This will tell us whether or not it's been an off lap or whether he's just saving it for the end. Rust now crosses the line. And where are we looking? It is 16.4. Okay, so he's gained nearly a full second, hasn't he, in the final sector. So this race isn't dead yet, still far from it. You've got Gertz now holding off Barile, going into the first corner. These two, remember, they are separated by one pit stop, but only half a second out on the track. So Barile, if he wants to get anything, or if he wants to cement that third place, he's going to have to get past Gertz, because that Mustang has seen better days in terms of pace. 2.8 seconds off of the back of Rust and with a pit stop extra to do compared to those around him. So Barile now half a second behind. What can he do? Rust now still 16.4 seconds. We'll circle back to that shortly, and we will take you through GT4 soon, although it is slightly more serene for the leads there, with Sergio Hernandez 32 seconds ahead of Nehring in the Camaro entered by Schwitzer Motorsport. Loyek and Hartmann in third and fourth. Now Rust going into the... so it's dropped a 10th going into the Dunlop curve. Tell me that the beam is stronger where there's a few more straights, which there is in sector 1. But let's see the rest of the lap and see if this gap does then come down, with Barile still only half a second behind Geert in the final podium positions. Geert, remember, has to do 2 more stops in 44 minutes. So you'd be a brave man to bet on him getting onto the podium from there. Okay, so with 40 minutes to go, well into the final hour of what has been a truncated 10-hour race presented to you by Schwitzer Racing League, the 10 hours at the ring, which has turned into a 6.5 and a 3.5 after a red flag due to a lobby crash had brought about an early end potentially to proceedings. There's been a little bit of a delay in terms of getting this back going, but the admins have done fantastically to keep the grid together and to put on a competitive race. And a competitive race it most certainly is, because we've been talking for a while about the McLaren in the Lamaxo Esports second entry, car number 11 or car 591, depending on what ACC wants you to believe, closing up on the BMW in the lead, car 414, which is Carlos, for the MSA Racing 414 entry. What we haven't mentioned is the Ferrari, bringing itself nicely into play, with that gap, if anything, coming down even more compared to the McLaren and the BMW. The Ferrari in the top three is the quickest of them all. The relay now, relay currently 2.4 seconds off the pace of Rust in front of him, but they are both beginning to catch quite quickly the BMW, and at a rate of time that would leave you open to, at the end of 10 hours of racing, I must remind you, 10 hours of racing, potentially a three-way battle for the lead. Now, Carlos has gained nearly a second on Rusty the first sector, so we'll have to wait and see why that's the case, because I can't see any I can see one GT4 car in the 591 entrance, which might explain at least part of it. Relay's taken another 6 cents as well, so we'll see how that affects things as well. The Cayman, to be fair, getting out of the way a little bit easier for the Ferrari. Not easier to do in the second sector compared to the first, but it can get quite tight and twisty. We'll wait to see what effect that has on Carlos and Rust, with only one GT4 between them, but 3 GT4s right in front of Carlos to get through over the next lap. So we've got car number 5 as well in front. That's Kramer in the NRW Performance McLaren, car number 5 there, who is in 8th, isn't he, in GT4. And we wait to see now what effect that has compared to the rest of the lap. Rust now coming back across the line, 15.9. Okay, so bit of a poor lap there, slow lap for the German compared to Carlos in front of Barile behind. Barile now 1.3 seconds behind. I think we'll fancy a look at second place. Now, if you're the Ferrari, what do? Do you wait and see if you can work together with the McLaren to try and see if you can get the lead? Or do you go all out for second place and risk potentially slowing yourselves up and open the door for the BMW in front? The BMW, who has shown such prodigious pace early in the race, suddenly a little bit slower and suddenly a little bit more cautious now as the minutes tick by. 80 laps done with Hans Rust now in the Ford chicane. We'll see now quite what the impact of GT4s has had on Carlos in the first sector. So Hans Rust going into double cover is 16.1. Okay, so the McLaren has lost a bit of pace somewhere, hasn't he? Because the car that was potentially looking like it was going to take up the challenge to the lead, BMW, has started to hit a brick wall. More GT4 involvement for the McLaren, and this might just be all that Carlos needs. He'll be loving the fact that Rust has started to hit a bit of problems in terms of speed and in terms of traffic placement as they go now through with Carlos himself having passed 2 GT4s on this lap alone. Now, the McLaren is normally a lot quicker in Sector 2, but there has been the added complication of a GT4 car in the midst of that, so we'll see now whether or not there's been any movement. Relay still the quickest of the 3, you would wager, in the top 3. 16.2 seconds for Rust now. Gap is growing, and Barile says, I want no part of this, so he's going to pit for an undercut. That's going to be a pit to overtake, and I suspect 1 litre to be put into that Ferrari. If there's any sense at all, they'll have saved that for such a situation. And will he be able to jump the McLaren for second place and potentially open the door for a race win? Rust has stabilised the gap just a little bit, hasn't he? 16.2 seconds now for Carlos, or between Carlos and Rust in the Lomaxo Esports McLaren versus the MSA 414 entry of the BMW. BMW now stuck in more traffic going into the forecourse. That's the GT4 leader, that's Hernandez, who struggling really. Is that no, he's the GT4. Well, it's Garcia. Jose Garcia now has taken over that car, so he's the Nets leader. So I'm not wrong in saying that he will lead and he will win. But a little bit of contact there between GT4 and GT3 leader. That will not go down well in the GT3 machine driven by Carlos. With Garcia is the net leader. To be fair, he's made his four stops, or he and Velocity Racing teammate Fernandez have made their 4 stops. They're just behind Naylring, who is 28 seconds up the road and won't be a threat for the win unless they're pretty cute on pit stops now. So Russ 16.5 seconds behind as they cross the first timing strip. Now got Relay, who has come out. Where's he come out in? Has he come out 3rd? I suspect that he's come out in 4th place. So it does look like that actually the Ferrari might have been a bit lighter. That may have curtailed their involvement in the lead, but we shall certainly have a look, see how this all plays out, because there's still plenty of permutations and predictions to play out in the final half an hour. Rust now 15.7 seconds. He started to refine his pace as he catches up the GT4 McLaren. That I think is the battered and bruised Framer, or it's Visa, I think it is actually, the Jamaica Connection Evil Racing car getting out of the way and certainly not proven to be even for his fellow McLaren. Rust now 15.9 seconds, so the gap has grown in the final sector. That may have been GT4 involvement, whereas Carlos now has a fairly clear run for the next couple of laps before he gets to a gaggle of about 3 cars. That could be crucial with 32 minutes left to play. 32 minutes left on the clock, and we're now looking to see exactly who is what and where. So that's Hoffman now in 4th place for the Bremse Brackenspreiser Porsche entry. So that car looking very quick earlier on, but beset by bad luck. So he comes up now to the back of a GT4 car, and then you've got Relay now, haven't you, in 5th position, but 3 seconds behind, having completed all of their stops. Chucking the Ferrari around, isn't he, into the final corner. We're just looking to see where he is in relation to the leader. Well, it's probably about a minute behind, so not an awful lot different to where they were. I think there may have been perhaps slightly slower stop, but not much. Rust there gaining back a little bit more time, isn't he? 15.7 seconds, so that is refusing to go away, but we just need to see maybe a little bit more from the McLaren in order to threaten the BMW. Carlos at the moment looks like, with half an hour to go nearly, that he's got it all under control. So Rust there going through the Audi chicane, the ditch down. You need to get a really good exit in order to have, 2 or 3 miles an hour extra by the end of the straight. It's a bit of an acceleration, so it clips the curve. You don't always follow to do that in the rain. But where's that? That was 15.7, 15.3. Okay, so 4 tenths gained. Now, what's the McLaren going to do in the final sector? So Carlos has already crossed the line, and now we wait to see quite where this is at. Is it me hyping up something that cannot be hyped, or is there something in this? There is something in this. It's another 2 tenths, but 6 tenths per second isn't going to cut it from here, because there's about 15 laps to go and 15 seconds between the drivers. Now, some of that may be made up in the pits, but Carlos is starting to stabilise this gap. The Relay now not making much of an impression on Hoffman and O'Reilly in front. There's 7 seconds between those 3 cars, with Jonas Getz 10 seconds off the back of that and still needing to pit again. So his goose is cooked for the podium. I think it's between Relay, Carlos and Russ. It's just now going to be in which order, because Relay's hoping to get a bit of an undercut. Hopefully be able to pass Rust with in the McLaren, the Lomaxo Esports McLaren entry, car 591. As darkness starts to fall, we're just now waiting to see whether or not the lead battle is going to ignite, or whether there's a bit of cool, calm collectiveness on the part of the 414 Racing outfit. A bit easier for the second GT3 car to pass the leader of GT4 on, well, the net leader of GT4 with Neyring still to pit to complete his pit strategy. And now we can see as O'Reilly comes in for the 415 machine. That's their final pit stop. And the MSA 415 car in fourth position will now probably come back out a net fifth, won't he? So you've got Gertz, Dharma, and Maserat. I don't think that the Apex GT McLaren is really in this race, so you'll certainly be cementing a top 5 position, provided there's no further dramas. Rust now going into the final sector beam. What's it going to be? The gap 15.2 seconds as Carlos now crosses the line. So you see it only fleetingly. 15.2 seconds again isn't going to cut the mustard. It's not enough for the McLaren. So the BMW, he needs dramas on the part of the MSA Racing 414 BMW, or he certainly needs to pick the pace up. Yeah, there's no time gain. So what you're looking at now is potentially Barile potentially undercutting Rust and maybe having a run from there. But again, it's all ifs, buts, maybes, with Barile having to deal with a bit of a belligerent Hoffman in the blue and orange Porsche as they go through the Audi chicane. Even there, I think that may be a bit of a long shot. 28 minutes to go, and Barile there, 2.5 seconds behind at the moment. It doesn't look like it's really gone down, has it? So the pace of the Porsche certainly solid, isn't it? He's one lap showing officially behind Rust. Rust 15.1 seconds behind Carlos, and I would suggest there's about a minute between Hoffman, Barile, and then Carlos in the lead, although that's a bit of a messy final sector, isn't it, for Hoffman? Now, what point will he pick? Because he doesn't want to get too involved with the Ferrari. They'll hold each other up. 14.5 seconds the gap between Rust and Carlos, and Hoffman has crossed the line with not much information to really show for it. Let's go into, I think that's car 199 that's gone through there, so that's nothing to worry about there. 414 and car 11 or 591, depending on who you believe, whether it's the cars or whether it's ACC. 14.5 seconds, although I think some GT4 involvement may have been at play there. Carlos now going through to the final sector. Yeah, I don't think that these two, either Hoffman or Barile, are going to challenge further. Certainly not Hoffman, but Barile a little bit too far back, as we now see Carlos coming into the pits. Is he? Well, this is a turn up for the books. So Carlos comes into the pits for his final stop, comes in right behind the GT4 entrant. That is Stein, Kevin Stein, who's 5th in GT4 for the Effect Motorsport 37 Aston Martin crew. That car going rather well, but interfering unwittingly with the leader of the race. Now, that might be quite costly by the time it comes around to handing out the prizes. Anders Rust 8 seconds behind across the line. Obviously, some of that will have been because his rival was travelling at pit lane speed. But we'll flick over now to Barile and see whether they come out ahead or behind. I would suggest that they will be coming out behind, and possibly by quite some distance, with Barile now having caught Hoffman. Hoffman in the Porsche is now starting to just about hold them up, isn't he? That is 1.4 seconds, although Carlos, it must be said, he isn't getting away as quickly as I thought he might. Okay, he's completed his pit stop now, so he's going down the pit lane. He's towards the end of the pit, so that's always a good start, and he's going to come out well ahead of Barile and Hoffman. Now, is Hoffman coming into the pits? He is not, so Barile now has another lap of staring at the back of that Porsche and going at the speed of that Porsche rather than anything else. So Hoffman showing officially is 67.3 seconds behind. We'll wait for that to shake itself out, and we've just got to see now whether Rust can really get his skates on and how much fuel or tyres he has to put on. So currently it is Carlos in that final stint, although we'll wait to see whether or not that changes as they go through the first sector into the full curve. So car number 11 or car number 591 is the leader here, even if it is listed as car number 11. That's ACC doing ACC things once again, so I do apologise if I get the two mixed up. I will try and talk about the cars I can see on track with the 414 entrant in the BMW MSA Racing. now 46 seconds behind officially as he goes through the first sector just as Rust goes through the second sector. So we'll wait to see if that gap grows. This McLaren has got, he's got 25 minutes to make that stop. It just depends on what he needs to do. Does he need fuel? Does he need to swap over? Where are they? Carlos hasn't got out of the car, so it was a fairly short pit stop. You would have to deduce from that, though his pace has been rather remarkable at times this race. So, further pits, I think that Stefan Dahmer has pitted, so he pits from 6th. That means that Hupert and Maserati, well, no, Hupert will shake itself out. Dahmer's now leaving the pit now, so that will sort itself out. Barile, meanwhile, still stuck behind Hoffman. This is beginning to ruin the Italians' race. I do wonder if they had any more fuel, whether it might have been better to use it and get ahead of Hoffman, because Hoffman has not been as quick as the 41 Ferrari, who was out. This team, remember, this car was out of the race before coming back in after the server crash. Now, Hoffman goes down the inside of a GT4. That's the Cayman, isn't it? That must be Milizia, Scuderia 5 Racing, 6th in GT4 currently. And that opens the door for Barile to have a go maybe down the inside of Hoffman. Hoffman covers that off and is now a quarter of a second ahead. But he does let the Ferrari go. So I think that might have been formation flying there. The Ferrari goes round the outside into turn 1. And now we can see how quick that car really is. He's got probably about 13 seconds to make up on Carlos ahead. So they had a rather similarly length pit stop. And now we wait to see whether Rust is going to jump them in the pit lane or whether Rust is going to funnel out behind, because the whole plan was for Barile to pass and undercut Carlos, and that has not worked, with the pace being somewhat stymied by the 100 Porsche entry driven by Hoffman in third, or what was third position is now in fourth position, having been overtaken by Barile. And we see now Rust coming into the pits. Right, this is where the race is going to be won or lost. 23 minutes to go. This could be crucial. That's the Schumacher S's. That's where Carlos is at the moment. That looks like quite a gap to make up, doesn't it? But you spend at least half a minute in the pits with another 10 seconds stopping and starting again because of the wonderful way in which this car does pit stops. Now we see Rust into the pits. Their pit barrage is a little bit sooner, or a little bit further up the pit lane compared to the BMW. So when they set off, don't just assume that he's going to take the lead. Now, how long is he going to be stationary for? Because this matters. Carlos now coming around the final corner, and I think Carlos is going to take a rather comfortable lead because Rust still hasn't left the pit bay. So Rust needs to get out quickly, and it's not going to happen. So 22 minutes gone, that's a minute gone, and Rust now leaves the pits just about, but Carlos is out and away. And I fear for second place for Rust, because he's got a long way to go down the pit lane, and here comes Barile now. The race for second place might be on, but I think Carlos has got the lead. 13.1 seconds for Barile, and here comes Rust now out of the pit lanes. That is third place there for the Lomaxo Esports McLaren. Oh, I so hope that we might get a grandstand finish for the race win, but I think the BMW, credit to them, has done just enough. 21 minutes to go and 13 seconds for Barile to find in the Virtual Pro Racing Ferrari. Car number 41 is now in the second, or the second place is now the first of the challengers to Carlos. We'll wait to see whether or not there's any movement in that gap. 13.1 seconds as Carlos now gets into the first, or end of the first sector straight away. We've got Rust now going around the outside, running into some GT4s. That's their goose cooked, I would have thought, for the top two positions. 12.9 seconds Barile now, he'll have to get his skates on, but there's still half a chance if this Ferrari can start to take time off of Carlos. This race isn't done. Carlos has got to engage for just a little bit longer as we go into 20 minutes to go. I'll take a very short break, and then we'll take you through the final 18 minutes of this 10-hour marathon. Welcome back to the final knockings of the 10 hours at the ring of here at the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit, brought to you by Schwitzer Racing League. A 3.5-hour sprint after issues 6.5 hours into the race has left us with a tantalising finish, with Marcus Carlos in the 414 MSA Racing BMW entry, 11 seconds ahead of Barile in the 41 Ferrari, brought to you by Virtual Pro Racing Team. Now, this car, I must remind you, was out of the race with connection issues just before the first race ended abruptly, with the results only being taken from the second race. It's a reprieve. Now, can they turn that reprieve into the lead as opposed to second place? Hannes Rust threatening to take the lead so much earlier on, but unfortunately third place is going to be the best that they can do. 10.6 seconds now, Barile to Carlos, and as soon as we go on to him, he goes off the track and outbrakes himself going into the Dunlop curve. That may just be enough for Carlos. Carlos will know what the gaps are because of the proximity of the two on the circuit. I suspect that may just be the final nail in the coffin for Barile and Virtual Pro Racing Team. A game fight it has been, but that may be just a step too far now after the error. You've got now, speaking of drivers with a bit of redemption, we've got Hupert in the 415 Ford, which was beset by connectivity and other technical issues earlier on in the day. Again, the 3.5-hour reset, as it has been, has brought them back into play, and they're now fourth when they had no hope of that top 5 finish now, but they have taken advantage, more than taken advantage of that good fortune, and have excellently guided that Ford Mustang back into the top 4. Manafeld in the Porsche, blue and orange Porsche, representing the team known as Bremsch Backenspreiser, easy for me to say, in 5th place, with Herkhausen for the first Schwitzer Motorsport entrant in 6th place, driving the 444 Ford Mustang, with Bloom, Daniel Bloom, who for so long looked like a winning driver in that Porsche 555 entrance, the second of the Schwitzer Motorsport entrants. Unfortunately, it's not worked out in the second race, with him leading for parts in the midway point of the race. You've still got Jörg Majerat, who's the last to make his pit stop in GT3, in 8th position. They may then drop back behind Phantom in 9th in the Apex GT entrance. That is the pink and blue, or purple and blue McLaren there, looking to maybe sneak a top 8. They're well clear of the Hispania Racing Junior team, car 199. That has had a few problems as well, so that's way back in last place overall of the finishers, and in 10th in GT3. In GT4, it's looking a little bit more simple, let's say that. Christoph Vetter in the Schwitzer Motorsport Camaro isn't close, I'm afraid, to challenging the class of the field today, whether it's been the 3-hour sprint, the 3.5-hour sprint, or the 6.5-hour marathon that began earlier today before being abruptly cut short, with Jose Garcia and Hernandez, his teammate Sergio Hernandez, being the class of the GT4 field. Whatever the race has thrown at them, they've been well clear at the head of GT4, with Christoph Vetter in the Camaro being a consistent challenger, but a challenger only. Loyek in the Mercedes, having run third earlier on, is still third for the Gridline Motorsports second entry, with Stefan Schirmann in the Schwitzer Motorsport GC4 entry Mercedes car 404, ahead of Kevin Stein in the Effect Motorsport Aston Martin. 5th place in class is about where they've been for the majority of the race, with Milizia in the Scuderia 5 Racing Porsche Cayman, seemingly an ever-present in that car. At the moment, it seems every time we've been on that car, it's been him in the car. So he's currently in 6th place ahead of Kramer, Visa, Hall, which you can see there in the Aston Martin, US-based team of WUGA Racing. UGA Motorsports having a bit of a difficult time, but they've fought on gamely, even if they are in 9th position, with Richard in the Gridline Motorsport Mercedes entrance. He is now in last in GT4, but still ahead of one of the GT3 runners, so we've got a bit of a chance of at least avoiding last place overall, which might be the carrot that they need to be dangled. Though Visa is currently still in the pit lane, so they may just nick it overall as well in the GT4 category. That will be 9th place in GT4 and avoided last place overall. We're going to go back to the lead duo, and yes, as you can see now, the relay 11.5 seconds behind with 12 minutes to go. I would suggest that Carlos, being the driver of the calibre that he is, will see this through now. No real interruptions coming up beyond the 213 McLaren. That is the Jamaica connection GT4, which won't provide too much of an issue. There's not much really that's coming out ahead. You've got cars, that 555, which is the Porsche, that's blue. You won't be in trouble by that. Maybe you might be troubled by the 199 Ferrari entrant, which has had a few issues throughout the race. But you would suggest that Carlos, provided he keeps it on the island as darkness starts to fall in the Nürburgring, will have enough. Barile fighting gamely, but potentially a little bit too little too late, with Rust in third place. Hannes Rust in third position in the Lamaxo Esports entrant McLaren, 12.8 seconds behind, and likely to stay in third position because Hooper, for all the good work that they've done, they're not going to make the MSA 415, certainly not on pace anyway. They're certainly not going to make the top three. As gallantly as they fought, it's not going to be the case, although he does try to go around the outside of the Aston Martin. That was a bit of a scary moment. Aston Martin GT4 taking the normal racing line. I think not particularly happy with the driving of Hooper there, but typical GT3, GT4 stuff. The gentleman all sort it out now as he goes up the inside of the McLaren. That's Kramer in the NRW Performance McLaren, so slightly easier there, I would suggest, than the pass on Stein. Stein there a little bit shaken and stirred going into the chicane now as he does pass as well the GT4. That is, I think, that might be Sherman in the 404 Mercedes. So 10 minutes to go, 10 hours of racing almost, 10 minutes to go plus whatever's added on at the end depending on when Carlos crosses the line. I would suggest that this is probably 5 laps to go, given that it's a 2-minute lap in the wet and we have got 9 minutes and 50 seconds to go. So I would suggest there that we're going to get, it's largely 10 minutes from now as he goes through the final corner to complete lap 93 of this shortened race, with Barile in second position in the Ferrari. It's going to be second only. He's not making any inroads on Carlos with at least a decent go. Well, he's got a second on him, but that's not going to be anywhere near enough. He's going to need some real dramas to hit the BMW 414, which has been really the class of the field, come rain or shine, throughout most of this event, and certainly most of the race. They were fighting all before them, or all behind them, sorry, I should say, in the first hour after issues for the 444 car, which started poles as they lost out in the first 5 minutes to go right to the very back, drops 40 seconds off the lead, and then hit further problems throughout this particular race. And as Rust in the McLaren, 14 seconds off the race, I think he's just bringing it home now, isn't he? As sensible as that can be. Now, third position for the Lamaxo Esports 2 entry, or the second entry, will do very nicely indeed after the difficult start they had. Both of the Lamaxo cars have had problems. One of the Lamaxo McLarens has indeed retired, but third position and a reprieve for this particular team, this particular crew, who have risen up, I think, from a really poor start from before. They were 6th when this ended, so there's nothing to say that they wouldn't have carried this on and certainly gotten to the top 3 or 4, despite the fact that obviously they did have a difficult start. We've got 8 minutes to go, 10.2 seconds. Barile is behind Carlos. and I suspect that Carlos might just be buttoning it off, although he has had some GT4 interference. He's got another bit of interference ahead, then that might just be it, depending on when they catch the 222 car, which is Loic in third position. But beyond that, you don't see an awful lot of room for interruptions. You've got the 110 car, that's Richard and Gridline Motorsport, that don't suspect they'll prove a bit of much of a problem. 94 laps in the book now, with Barile coming across the line now. So what's that? That is 9.2. Well, he another couple of laps like this and maybe we'll start talking, because that was over a second out of the lead. But I suspect that it is all under control, with Barile now going down the inside. It's not Barile, it's Carlos going down the inside of that Richard Gridline Motorsport entry towards the back of GT4. And now you've got Barile just coming across a couple of GT4 drivers as well. So the car 213, that's Weiser in the Ferrari. No, that's not. That's Maserat. That's Jörg Maserat in the Ferrari, isn't it? 777. Bit of a torrid second race for the NRW Performance 777 car. That car had at times looked well beaten. Had a poor second hour where it lost a lot of time to, and almost a lap indeed, to the leaders after earlier challenging. But really, honestly and truthfully, it's been just downhill ever since they restarted, so they'll have happily taken the classification from 6.5 hours in. But the fair thing to do was to try and get a race finish. You never want to finish it on a disconnect, and I think that's what the Ablins have tried to do. And look, finally, we've had so much rain throughout this, finally it's starting to ease off in rain within 30 minutes, just as the race finishes with 5 minutes to go. That's taking the mix somewhat, isn't it? As you can see now, Barile 8.8 seconds, so another half a second out of Carlos so far this lap, but with 5 minutes to go, and I would suggest 3 full laps to go, that won't be any cause for concern for the MSA Racing 414 squad. 8.3 seconds. Good, but not quite good enough, is it? Going down the inside of Richard in the 110 Mercedes that we saw a little bit earlier on, with Carlos lapping them. No further interruptions for the moment. They might catch some towards the end with 222, car number 1, so that's Milizia and Loic, all the different parts of the GC4 race. They might catch them, but beyond that, I don't think there's going to be an awful lot of interruptions for these two. So we're going to see it through with 5 minutes to go. We'll just take you through the GT4 as well. As we can see now, that is Jose Garcia, who's just been lapped by the Phantom GT3 entry. That's the McLaren car number 45. So Jose Garcia bringing it home with this team, having really been a class of the GT4 field, and well clear of Christoph Vetzer. Christoph Vetzer in the Schwitzer Motorsports Chevrolet Camaro, which has done remarkably well to get to second, really, that car not being excellent in the rain. So throughout the whole 10 hours we've had this wet weather following us around the Eiffel Mountains, with no unrelenting rainfall so far, and Vetzer now getting his way through the final chicane, and I suspect he is, I can't really see because it never really shows up, but 998 is, I reckon they're about a minute apart by the time they get to the final corner. As he goes across the line now, so 505, potentially it's about 45 seconds. Not really anything for the leading Garcia to lose any sleep over. So Velocity Racing Team looking forward to taking a dominant win, and that is 46.8 seconds. I wasn't far out, was I, with 45 looking at the map? So 46.8 seconds really reflects over 3.5 hours just how dominant this crew have been. It's been on easy street for the last 3 hours, really, once they got the gap going forwards. We've just got one little thing to clear up, and that's Jörg Maserat. Now, 3 minutes to go. Is that car going to make its final stop? Otherwise, there may be some further consequences. Maserat, I think it's 2.5 minutes, or sometimes they do a 2.5 minute penalty or some sort of stop go or something like that if they don't pit. So that'll be something for the game and indeed the track to pick up on. as the race finishes in 3 minutes time, just over. Relay now 7 seconds behind Carlos, but I suspect a lot of this is by design. Carlos is just going through the first sector, isn't he? So what have we got here? 2 minute race, 2 minute lap. So this is certainly the penultimate lap. He's just getting stuck behind that Cayman, isn't he? That is car number 1. That is Milizia in the Scuderia 5 racing entrance. Solid but unspectacular from them, but they have been a permanent fixture in 6th position in this race, certainly since we joined 2 hours ago. And Carlos there dispatches of the Cayman with ease, as I suspect Relay will do towards the end of the lap, with that Porsche Cayman not showing lightning speed, although it is 6.3 seconds. I would suggest that that is, again, by design. Doesn't really need to push the car, but with 1 lap to go, don't really want to be conceding too much more time than that in the sector. Okay, there's GT4 interference, but I would suggest that is all it is, as Carlos now rounds the second part of the outer chicane to go and finish the second sector for the penultimate time, going into the NGK chicane. No mistakes here, please, and thank you, as he just hauls the car over the curb, still giving it plenty, isn't he? But I suspect with 5.5 seconds to go that he's not exactly wringing the car's neck. So around the final corner, there is going to be one more little bit of interference, as Loyek in the 222 machine, as we do start the final lap now. So Loyek in the 222 machine is the only thing standing really between victory and Carlos. He goes down the inside and Loyek gets well out of the way there. Excellent driving there from the Mercedes. Sensible driving it is too. And Carlos there passes, 6 seconds, so I suspect that Barile knows that the game is up. Carlos now into turn 3, and what a stunning drive it has been from all aboard this excellent 414 entry. The class of the GT3 field throughout most of the race. Firstly, the truncated 6-hour race that we had earlier, and then the rescue package, the 3.5-hour sprint. For all concerned, this car has been towards the front all the way round. Barile and the Virtual Pro Racing team, with their reprieve, not quite enough to rescue a win from the jaws of retirement, as the Ferrari, blue and yellow Ferrari, is running out of steam just at the end. Hannes Rust, meanwhile, what looked like a possible challenge for the win, is going to be a distant 3rd place for the Lamaxo Esports, but they can be very happy indeed, as what was a poor opening gambit has been rescued by Rust, especially in the last couple of hours. And some excellent driving there has rescued 3rd place ahead of another reprieve received Mustang, car 415 Hupert, the second in the MSA Racing. That car beset by issues, but rescuing 4th place in the restaged 3.5-hour race. We're coming now to Carlos as he goes up to the chicane for the final time. No need to worry about the GT4s in front as he goes through to the final corner, and it's going to be a win for the first ever Schwitzer Racing League endurance race. The 10 hours at the ring, almost 10 hours of racing, ends with victory for car 414. The MSA Racing 414 entry wins by 4.4 seconds, and Carlos takes it over the line. And that is an absolutely superlative race from the team, the BMW, the class of the field. Relay takes 2nd place for Virtual Pro Racing to complete the most unlikely of turnarounds with their issues earlier in the day. And as Rust is another man on a redemption arc, he takes 3rd for Lamaxo Esports to complete a turnaround for the 33 or 591 car, whatever it now is. Rupert's now, speaking of redemption arc, that car having disconnected and had all sorts of issues earlier in the day. It's wonderful to see. It may not have been a disconnect, but certainly some issues earlier on which prevented car 415's running out of the final corner and into 4th place, as we can see also that Phantom in the McLaren, the 45 McLaren, has also finished the race in 9th position, with Maserat in the pits, finishing his race in the pits, a bit Michael Schumacher style. This one not for the win, this for 8th place. Manafeld, meanwhile, in the Bremse Brackenspreiser Porsche, finishes in 5th position in GT3. We're now waiting for, as we can see, Garcia has claimed GT4 victory for Velocity Racing Team, and that is a dominant display. No one in the same class as that Mercedes entrance in GT4 today, with Christoph Fetzer in 2nd place, completing 50 seconds off of the eventual winner. But that is a stunning drive for that Chevrolet Camaro. Has no business being at the sharp end in a 10-hour wet race at the Nürburgring. Loyat for Gridline Motorsport in 3rd position in GT4. They can be rightly pleased with their efforts. And in 4th place, it does look like Kevin Stein. Well, that might be that some drivers have left. Kevin Stein in the Effect Motorsport Aston Martin, with Sven Schirmann in 5th position to bring home Schwitzer Motorsport, completed top 5 for Schwitzer Motorsport's primary entry in the 404 Mercedes. That car looked like it could win earlier on. Malizia in 6th position for the Scuderia 5 Racing Porsche to round out the top 6. Right, you've heard quite enough of me over the course of today. I want to say thank you very much to Irish for reaching out to me to commentate today. It's been an absolute pleasure bringing some English language commentary to the 10 hours at the ring for Schwitzer Motorsport. I want to say thank you to those, and I shall see you again, hopefully, very soon. Take care and good night.